Good morning, my LAPCS scholars. Welcome to the New England Colonies Part 2. So by now you have done your outline notes for New England Colonies Part 1. Today you're going to do Part 2, and do not forget to do the exit ticket at the end of the agenda. So, New England Colonies Part 2. And yes, I'm sitting outside in this beautiful fall day. Doesn't get much better than this. All right. Religious conformity, dissent, and toleration. Religious conformity. So the church occupied a central position, a super important position in Puritan society. Convinced that they were undertaking God's work, the Puritans emphasized religious conformity. What does conformity mean? It means to do what you are told and do not ask questions. Although the Puritans came to America for religious freedom, they did not tolerate dissent. So what were they running from? Remember part 1. What were they breaking from when we talked about separatists? So think about that, refer back to that, and then you'll understand. So they did not tolerate dissent. Dissent basically means that if you were not conforming, then you were not following the principles of the Puritan Christian religion, okay? Roger Williams, this handsome gentleman there. Roger Williams challenged the religious authority of the Puritan leaders by arguing for the complete separation of church and state. That means that the church has one important place in a person's life, and the state or the community, the public, has another. Okay? That's what the separation of church and state is. Declaring that forced worship stinks in God's nostrils. Williams called for freedom from coercion. Coercion is the use of force or pressure or threatening people in matters of faith. Banished from Massachusetts, Williams fled to Rhode Island, where he founded a new colony based upon freedom of religion. This is Rhode Island right there. Anne Hutchinson. Like Williams, Anne Hutchinson advocated unorthodox or unconventional religious views that challenged the authority of the Puritan magistrates. In other words, she wanted to change certain things that had to do with the Puritan way of Christianity. Claiming to have had revelations from God, Hutchinson questioned established religious doctrines and the role of women in Puritan society. Outraged by her claim to have a direct divine inspiration, Governor Winthrop fulminated with a thunderous verbal attack. We did not mean to discourse with those of your sex. In other words, in Puritan Christian churches, women were supposed to remain quiet while the men were in charge and had a voice. But Hutchinson didn't believe that. In 1638, Massachusetts authorities banished Hutchinson to Rhode Island. She went where she would be tolerated. Hutchinson later moved to Long Island, where she was killed by Indians. Religious toleration. The Puritans were unable to stamp out or keep down or control religious dissent. Ironically, religious intolerance in Massachusetts promoted religious tolerance in Rhode Island. So people who were part of a place that was intolerant or didn't accept other ways of thinking and being needed to go somewhere else. So they went from Massachusetts to Rhode Island. The halfway covenant. The first generation of Puritans were dedicated to building a model community based upon a strict moral code. Their churches only accepted persons who could demonstrate that they were among God's elect. Remember that from part 1. who were the elect. Go back and look. As the Puritan communities became increasingly prosperous or were making money, doing really well economically, the original Puritan mission became less important to the second and third generation of settlers. So as people were coming over or being born into the communities, they started to rethink how the original colony was going to be. The Halfway Covenant was designed to respond to the decline of religious zeal, zeal meaning fervor or dedication among second generation Puritans. It eased the requirement for church membership by allowing of baptism to children of parents who could not provide testimony of their own election. So in other words, it was a sort of partial church membership. They were allowed to be there, they were allowed to worship, but they weren't necessarily fully part of it. But this was a way for them to keep people in the church for a longer period of time, because if you can't keep people in your church, then what's going to happen to the church? Relationship with the Indians. So the Puritan settlers did not settle in an uninhabited wilderness. As many as 100,000 Indians lived in New England. And this, remember, is a problem because the natives had the land and the settlers came over, colonized, and took the land. They were taking the land. In the beginning, the coastal Indians taught the Puritan settlers how to plant corn. They also exchanged furs for various trinkets and manufactured goods. So in the beginning, it wasn't a hostile relationship. But smallpox epidemics soon decimated or destroyed or killed the Indian population. For example, by 1675, the population of southern New England tribes fell from 65,000 people to just 10,000. Overall, when you look at from colonial times to about early 20th century, Native Americans populations fell by approximately 90%. So that is 9 out of every 10 Native Americans died. Some of them, as we will see, will die from warfare and other violent ways, but most of them died because of disease. Surviving leaders quickly realized that the English settlers intended to deprive use of the privilege of our land and drive us into utter ruin. So they were taking land and people were dying from diseases. Many New England Indians were determined to defend their way of life from the relentless growth of white settlement. Relentless, they couldn't stop it. It was unstoppable. Led by Chief Metacom, also known as Chief Philip, the Indians attacked and burned settlements all across Massachusetts. Although they suffered great losses, the colonists killed Metacom and defeated his followers. So that's it for part 2. What I would like you to do is to make sure you're writing these in outline notes. Contact Ms. Marks and I if you need help with anything. Complete the exit ticket and get to it. All right, you have a good rest of your day. Try to go out there and get some sun, enjoy the weather because it's beautiful. All right, see you next time.